Hi there, thank you so much for clicking the thumbnail and being interested in my work. In this video I share with you my techniques and tips on how I achieve the skin tones by doing a comparison between do's and don'ts. So be sure to watch it right through till the end, because here and there I'll be slowing things down in real time so you can take a closer look. So let's dive in and take a look. I've done the outline already just to save time on the video. I did it freehand, but you do it whichever method you feel most comfortable with. Now for the underdrawing, I'm using these basic colours plus a warm red, which is not illustrated here. Now for the underdrawing, the don't side, just be aware that not to put too much white down. So what I'm doing here is illustrating what happens when you put too much white down. It creates a milky look, and also when there's a tendency to rush the underdrawing because you're wanting to get to the more interesting stages, like putting all the colours, the rich colours in. You really should take time getting the outline, making sure it's drawn correctly and getting everything in position, and really taking care to get a balance and the energy of the painting for the preparation for the next layers. Now for the do's example, I'm using the white, varying the actual strokes and pressure to create texture, then glazing with the warm red and yellow ochre to start with, but basically trying to make sure that the actual drawing is correct and just correcting that outline. So I'm preparing the way for the actual next stages, so I'm taking my time. Even at this beginning stage, I'll be connecting to the energy of the person by opening my heart, letting go of the mind, and letting these movements just happen. The more you open your heart and send this energy to that reference image, the more energy will shine back at you. And by just opening up and letting go and letting this express through you, it will just happen for you. So at this stage I'm not worried about getting the values correct or the chroma. It's all about just getting the shapes in the right place and the feel of the drawing. So when I start putting on the rich colours, it's a lot easier. Everything is all prepared and I ain't got to move things around too much. I can just focus on getting those really nice subtleties in. So I'm using the white to create texture and then glaze over the top. So it's using the white glaze, using the white glaze. And for the lips, I'm using two different colours, the cold red and the warm red together. And for the shadows, I'm using a complementary colour, which is dark green and red together to create the shadows. Just getting the location correct for the pink top, just a little bit of detail in there, but all that will be corrected later. So laying the white down and then just glazing with the cold red on the top. Normally for the rich colour stage I use these Caran d'Ache colours here, but for this study I didn't need all those. I just used the odd one, which I'll mention as I use them. Now for the don't side, I'm using too much white again, which is creating a milky look. So I'm using the Chinese white, which is rich in pigment, but I'm using too much. You'll see more when I start doing the correct side or the do side. But what I'm doing here is just laying on that sort of white and then glazing over the top. But really the actual rich colour stage is all about getting the value correct and the chroma, where here I'm not doing that. I'm just sort of rushing it through because my technique does take a long time, and I think it can make you feel a bit sort of pressured. And I'm just doing it a little rushed here, where I'm not taking enough time to be aware of the different values and the subtleties, even in the rich colour stage, which will come more apparent when I show you how I did the actual do side, which you'll see later on in this video. To desaturate the red, I'm using green, which is the complementary colour, which creates a natural tone of the red. Just rushing through this don't side, because I want to spend most of my time on the do side with real time showing you how I do it correctly. But basically what I'm not doing here is being aware of the values, the chroma. It's just quite rushed in. Little tip is to actually squint the eyes to see the values and open the eyes to see the colour. Basically all I wanted to mention really with the actual don't side is not to use too much white and being too heavy with the white, because I know I use white glaze, but it's just to illustrate what happens when you put too much white in. It looks very, very milky and it don't look natural. But you'll see me on the do side how I use the white correctly with my technique, and how I do it very, very slowly in stages. Now for the rich colour stage on the do side, basically it's all about taking your time, connecting to the energy like I mentioned earlier, and just letting these things happen, but be more sort of aware of the values and the chroma. So basically what I'm doing is doing small circles with the white or the pink mix, creating a texture and then just glazing over the top, because the skin is not smooth. This way I'm developing layers of different subtleties, because every time you glaze over and then you put the white, you're making a tint of that previous glaze in certain areas, then you glaze again and then you tint again and glaze, tint, and then you get all these little subtleties that sort of shines through the pigment. Going it down now to real time so you can get a closer look at what I've just mentioned. So I'm putting the white down, different marks, different squiggles, and then just glazing over the top, creating different subtleties of colour, and then just tint it again and then glaze it until it develops into the right shade. Now for the shadow of the nostril there, I'm using dark green and then I've put a warm red with it. Normally if it's a really deep shadow I'll put a cold red, but with it being very subtle and there's still some warmth in there, I just add some warm red with it. And that creates a natural shadow because it's complementary. So whatever colour you're using, just use the complementary to get the shadow of that colour. So if it's blue, it's orange. If it's red, it'll be green. If it's yellow, it's purple. If you're enjoying this video, why not subscribe? It's absolutely free, and then you're sure not to miss any of my future videos. To do 3 stages. The first one is the outline and underdrawing, the second one is the rich colour stage, and then the final one is the detailed. Once everything's in, I'm looking at the whole thing and then just putting subtle details here and there. So basically this is the second stage, just working on getting that chroma right. So if I need to get the chroma more sort of glowing, I add a bit of lemon yellow to the mix. And if I need to desaturate a colour, I use the complementary colours. For the top lip I'm using Vermilion from the Caran d'Ache, which is a really nice rich colour. And then for the shadow in the mouth I'm using cold red with a cold green. And then just using the white again just to get the texture and the subtlety. The Caran d'Ache white is okay for the real highlights and freshness. To get that sort of softness I tend to use the Carbothello chalkier white. Great combination for skin tones is yellow ochre, ultramarine blue and warm red. Now the combinations of those, it's like primary colours, you can mix any subtlety with them. It makes things really simple when you're using just 3 basic colours. You get to know all the subtleties and how to mix them, but what I've found that some areas need sort of a little lifting up a little with a bit of lemon yellow, and like I say, some sort of rich Caran d'Ache colour underneath those primary colours just does the trick in certain areas. And this is one of the colours here, which is the rose pink or portrait pink. Really does the trick with the colour. You can get the colour in there, the freshness, and then you can subtly tuck with putting blues and yellow ochres on it, or a bit of lemon yellow here and there. But for a sort of a basic sort of freshness, especially for baby skin, this is a really nice pencil actually. So this pink and the cold yellow together really creates a sort of a zinginess to the skin tone, but it's still subtle, and you need that subtlety for the baby's skin. So these are the two colours I just mentioned. Now for the lips, I've used the warm red and a cold red mix, so it's a mixture of the two, just trying to get the temperature right. Trying different things, you always have to have a try on different things, but to get the shadow, like I mentioned before, you use the complementary colour, so I've used green and the red for the shadows. Now it's very important to actually get the edges of the lips soft, where, you know, on the dote side, if you keep it harsh, it looks like plastic lips, so just be aware that you actually need to soften those edges of the lips just to create that realism. I'm just slowing it down here just so you can see how I'm doing the shadows, using that Carbothello white just to create that texture, like I mentioned, little swiggles. But to create the shadow, which is still a little bit of a glow in there, I'm using the lemon yellow to create that chroma. Then I'm putting a bit of warm red on there, but you notice it's too glowy now. So what I mentioned before, if it's too orange, you desaturate it, you add blue. So what I'm going to do now is add blue to it, and then that will calm it down so that it becomes the correct. This area is more red, so I'm using the dark green to actually create the shadow. So you can see how it works with the complementary colours. Right, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank all my patrons for all their wonderful support. I really appreciate it. It means the world to me, makes all the difference. Now, if you're considering joining me on Patreon and would like the benefit of longer, slower and more in-depth video, please check out the link in the description below. Now, this video is on my Patreon now as a 4.5 hour real-time audio, real-time video, so you actually see me doing it step by step, and I explain the procedure moment to moment. So if you want to check that out, please take a look at those links in the description below. Now for the lightest there, I'm using the Rembrandt white there, and then just glaze over with a bit of pink later with that, just to get a similar sort of shade. The colour of the top is actually the Portrait Pink pencil, which I've used in the skin there, which is great because it's like a reflected light from the baby's top, which helps with creating that sort of feeling of unity. So I'm using the same colour pencil there, and then desaturating it with a bit of green if I needed to, and then I just mix a little bit of blue to create a purple with that as well in places. Slowing it down to real time now because I'm using the Flesh Tint 10% from Caran d'Ache now to create that glow in this shadow of the cheek. It's very fresh and subtle, but you notice I'm doing very small circles to get the texture, because like I mentioned before, the skin is not soft, there's loads of different sort of textures to it, and then mixing in that warm red, and eventually I will mix in bits of blues, bits of greens, and then using that Carbothello white to correct and get the correct shade eventually. But you'll see all this when I start putting the details in, which is the next stage. If you're enjoying this video, why not give it a like and share it with your friends? It would mean so much to me, as this would help the channel to grow. So just to recap what the rich colour stage is all about, it's about creating the correct chroma, the value, and getting everything in position ready for the detail stage. I always like to leave the details to the end, because if you focus on one point and do everything to the detail stage, then move on to another section, then on to another section, I've found that, you know, you could spend a lot of time doing all that detail and then you've got to change it. So I'd rather make sure that all the values and chroma is being put right before adding those details. Right, so the final details then. So first of all, getting the highlight correct. So I'm using actually the azurite white and that. Also adding another colour to the mix, which is a warm tint, a warm red tint, as well as the cold red tint of the portrait pink, and mixing those in as well in certain areas. You got to try these things, you know, try different things and see what works, see what makes it fresher and that. But yeah, just basically getting smaller and smaller with the marks. So you put in very, very small circles and just taking your time with it and just really focusing on getting the glow, the value and the feeling. So you're really opening up to the energy of the portrait, feeling the energy, sending love, actually open the heart to the actual image, no matter what you're working on. If it's a landscape or anything, just open your heart, send love to it, and the energy will come back, and then you actually let that flow through your hands. So you're constantly switching the mind off, focusing the heart, opening the senses, and just letting it flow and just feeling your way through. Now you're squinting the eyes to see the values, open the eyes to see the colour. Now for the lips, I'm just putting a bit of cold green over that red to desaturate it, because if it's glowing too much, just add, like I mentioned before, just add in that complementary colour just does the trick, and then just add in glints of sort of fresh colours in with that. That's another good thing, is to actually keep looking into the mirror, to reflection of it, so you can see it at a different angle, and then it brings out what needs to be done as well. So I do that a lot at this stage. It needs to be fresher, use the Caran d'Ache white and then glaze over top again. Just be very, very subtle with it and get smaller and smaller. Just learnt it into real time again, just so you can see how subtle I'm using the white, just creating very small circles. You're making a tint to what colour is there, so it's not, you're not putting too heavy a white in it, just tinting the colour that's there, but then just subtle over that with the certain colours just to create that sort of glow then. So what you're putting the white down first to create a glow, so when you put the colours on, that white you put down shines through, or that tint you put down shines through. So it's very, very subtle movements that's creating this texture. I'm just going to go quickly through the details on the don't side of things. There's a tendency you can not see the actual subtleties, because the detail stage is all about the edges as well as the chroma and the values. It's about getting everything to appear as one. So, you know, like on the don't side there, the lips are too sharp, which will create your eye to go to it too much, so then they needed to be softened. So you got to look at the edges. You know, some edges are soft, some are lost, some are a sharp edge, so you have to work out what needs to be done. And also here I've put too much glow on it, so there's not been enough awareness of the different values and also chromas, so that should have been desaturated more. So I'm just making these things up really to see what, you know, what things might be the case. Also the reflected light is too light. You have to be aware, if you squint your eyes to get the tonal value right, so that's another thing you have to be aware of. Really struggling for time now to actually go into detail with what I've done here, but if you want a closer look, like I say, it is on my Patreon page now as a 4.5 hour real-time audio, real-time video. Hope you enjoyed this video. Here's the study now at the correct angle so you can see the comparison. If you're interested in seeing more of my work, check out these links here. Take care.